Whoa, did not expect that. All right. So can everyone see my screen? Yep. All right, great. So everyone should have received a GitHub invite to the Oscar Platoon GitHub organization. If you did not get it, please reach out. We have a couple of pending invites, but I think these are all TAs for the most part. So everyone should have access to GitHub or Oscar Platoon GitHub. Can anybody speak up? What is GitHub and what is it used for?
GitHub is version control. It's used to house your code and show potential employers that you can potentially code.
Yeah, definitely. That's part of it. So GitHub is a online application where you store your code. You can collaborate with your team, other developers, or companies will store their code on GitHub, and it stores different versions of it as well. So like different save points, essentially. It's not specifically to show potential employers that you know how to code, but that is one of the benefits of having it. So if a potential employer were to go to somebody's GitHub and see if this person knows how to code and how often they code, they can see all these little green dots. These are commits, like things I've pushed to GitHub. But it's a central repository for code as well as the versions of your code base. So in the Oscar Platoon organization, the entire content, lectures, challenges all reside within the Oscar Platoon GitHub organization. And all these are repositories, repos. There's 107 repos. So Code Platoon, our Oscar Platoon is broken down into, so there's this curriculum repo. So if you click on the curriculum repo, I open it up into a new window or a new tab. So I highly recommend starring this or bookmarking this page, because this is where all the weeks and days and all the material is located at. So inside the curriculum repo, we have all these folders, and each folder represents a week. If I click on that folder and open it up into a new tab, each week is broken down into days. So here's week 1. Here's Monday May 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th. So each week we cover specific topics. Inside of each week, we have a weekly or a README, which covers the weekly topics that we cover, Git version control basics, GitHub, test-driven development. We'll talk about why it's important and what you'll be able to accomplish after completing this topic. So we're going to cover Git. We're going to be able to cover or do different save points. So this is what's going on this week. Now let's talk about what's going on today. And everyone should be following with me as well. So today is Monday, May 24th. We have video resources. This links to a previous cohort's week 1's lectures, recorded lectures. So here's all of week 1's recorded lectures of November Platoon, last cohorts. The topics we're covering: exploring your IDE, VS Code extensions, interacting with the command line. That's what we're going to be covering today. The goals of today is getting your local machine set up for the entire course. So if you have a Mac, we're going to cover InstallFest, which we're going to start within the next couple of minutes. If you have a Windows, we have the ability to have a cloud-based IDE and through AWS. You're going to be able to start using VS Code, and you're going to be able to navigate your computer via the command line. So here's the lessons command line. But first, let's start InstallFest. So everyone should be following with me now. So over the course of the next hour, hopefully we get this done in the next hour and 15 minutes. You're not necessarily going to know what we're installing or how or why we're installing it. You'll understand why we're installing it, but like what it's used for, because we're installing all the software we're going to be needing for the rest of the cohort. Questions about what we're about to do within the next hour?
Yes, Tom, Reno here. So does it matter what terminal we use, whether it be like iTerm2 or like through VS Code?
It doesn't really matter which one, but we're going to be using VS Code. Well, for InstallFest, I'll probably use iTerm, but pretty much going forward after today, and once Anchor goes through the command line, we're going to be using the terminal in VS Code. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, but we recommend VS Code.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. All right. So again, before we get started, just know that right now, within the next hour, it's going to be kind of chaotic, but I promise you by the end of the day, if you can't follow up, just by the end of the day, we will do our best and make sure everyone's computer is set up correctly. So if you can't, if you fall behind within the next hour, that's totally okay. You'll just work with one of the TAs or a fellow student to help you get everything set up. But we just kind of want to get through this within the next hour. So your goal is to get a working environment, not necessarily to understand everything that happens, just follow along closely. So everyone should have, if you're on a Mac, everyone should have installed Xcode. If you had any issues installing Xcode, that's okay. Again, we'll work with you after this and this afternoon. So just it's okay. And if certain things aren't working correctly right now, again, it's not the end of the world. But like we will get you up to speed. So make sure you have an Apple ID, everything. So here's the Mac setup. Ensure that you're running the most recent operating system. But what we're going to do is, so first, what we're going to do is download Slack. Obviously, probably everyone has already downloaded Slack, but I just kind of want to reiterate the proper way to download it and install it and where it should be located at. So you should download Slack from Slack download/Mac and download it here. Don't download it from the Mac App Store. And once you download it from here and install it, you'll want to drag and drop the Slack. Where is it? Crap. So once you have it downloaded and installed in here, you want to drag it and drop it into applications. So you actually want to drag and drop your Slack into the applications directory. This makes sure that it's installed at your root level of your OS. So download Slack if you haven't done it, and drag and drop it into the applications directory. Next, download Zoom. Same thing. Download Zoom. So it's already started. So let's actually open that up. So download Zoom. If I open that up and it installs everything, I'm not really going to go through all this, but I don't want to close it because it will close out the application. But if everyone obviously installed it already, but once it's installed, drag it and drop it into your applications directory. Last thing, sign up for Operation Code. Again, Rod kind of mentioned this. So Operation Code is, it's a very helpful resource for veterans in tech. I think they have jobs in there. You can ask advice, like career advice. Also, they'll able to help you answer any technical questions if you have any. So if you look at Operation, that's VS Code. Here's Operation Code. So right here, it's this little, they've got career advice, coding schools, general, and then just help if people need it. So like someone's got a technical question, here is operation code. So take the next 5 minutes till 11:10 and download Slack, Zoom, and sign up for operation code. Sorry, I forgot to keep recording. So again, complete InstallFest. We just installed VS Code, iTerm2. We dragged those applications into the applications directory on our machine. I opened up the complete InstallFest to a new window. So again, you're not going to know specifically what we're doing right now, like what or all the software we're installing, but just follow along. It'll slowly start to make sense as we go through the program. So first things first, we just installed Visual Studio Code. Next, we can install the Xcode commands. So this little gray box area with this $, that represents the terminal. So if I open up iTerm, where'd it go? So here's iTerm, which we just installed. Don't worry if yours doesn't look exactly like mine with the colors and everything. We're gonna do that later this afternoon. But if I copy Xcode select -- install, run that. So I already installed it. So it says command line tools are already installed. So I don't need to install those, but go ahead and install those, the Xcode commands. Next, we're going to install the code command in Visual Studio Code. So this command allows you to open a file or directory directly in VS Code. So if I click on this link, it's going to open up some documentation for VS Code. You're going to want to follow the instructions all the way down to restart the terminal for the new path to take into effect. But how this is going to work, so I'm going to launch VS Code. I'm open up Spotlight, VS Code. So it's opening up VS Code. I can open up the command palette by doing Command-Shift-P, or I can go up to, where'd it go? View command palette. And it's going to open up that little palette right there. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And if I type in code, it says shell command install code command in path. Click on that. So if you follow right here, open up the command palette, Command-Shift-P, and type shell command. So, or you can type in shell command like so. And install code command in path. Click on that. It's going to install it. And then you can restart whatever terminal you're using. So I'm just going to come over here for into iTerm. But if I type in code and just click enter, it will automatically open a VS Code for me. It's kind of what we want. So take the next 3 minutes to do that. So till 11:20. All right, let's keep going. All right, so now we're going to install Homebrew. Homebrew is what is called like the missing package manager for Mac OS. It essentially just allows you to customize installed libraries and packages and just customize installed software. So the first thing we need to do is copy which brew. So it's going to ask like which brew we want, or say like which brew we have. So which brew. And if the output is user local bin brew, you are good to go. So if you see something like that, you're solid. If you don't see that, run this command. So Homebrew is going to do a lot of work for us as it manages our software versions. So always ensure that it's up to date and that it's healthy. So once you run which brew and you see user local bin brew, run brew update, which might take a minute or so. So if I run brew update, it's going to update Homebrew for us. And then afterwards, after it's done updating, you're going to run brew doctor, which is going to it's going to say a bunch of stuff. You can read through each item and attempt to resolve any issues for Homebrew. Warnings are good to read, but are not mandatory to fix. So if you have a bunch of warnings, that's okay. You don't have to fix them. But ideally, if there aren't any warnings, then Homebrew, if you run brew doctor, so I updated. So I could do brew doctor. I'm going to get a bunch of warnings probably. It's okay. So it looks like I need to update Xcode. All right. But at the end of it, if you run brew doctor and you see your system is ready to brew, you're good to go. If you have warnings like I do, you can try to resolve them, but it's not 100% necessary. So let's take the next 3 minutes till 11:25 to install Homebrew. All right, let's move on to adjusting the path for Homebrew. Again, Homebrew is going to be installing a bunch of packages for us, and we want to install it to make sure it, when possible, our system is using Homebrew's installed packages. So the first thing we want to do is copy this echo $path, pipe tr space colon. So just this part. And if I clear that, so if you type clear on your terminal, it'll clear it. But if I do echo path, what you want to make sure is just user local bin right here comes before user bin, comes before bin. If that occurs in that order, you are good to go. So I notice I've got like user S bin. I've got a bin up here. I probably need to clean this up, but it should be okay. If it doesn't, you'll need to open up your bash profile, which we will cover this in a little bit. And you'll have to add this following command. All right. Once you adjust the path and user local bin, user bin, and bin are in the correct order, we're going to move on to installing SQLite. So SQLite is a light database. It's literally just a file that allows you to run SQL commands on. So SQL is structural query language. It allows you to write commands to interact with a SQL database. So we're going to do brew install SQLite 3. And if you're having issues with brew installing, this probably won't work for you. But again, that's okay. We'll some of the TAs as well as Ankur will help you rectify whatever issues you're running into. So you install that. Looks like I already have it installed and it's up to date. So that's good. The next is we'll want to install Postgres. Postgres is a relational SQL database. So we're on to do brew install Postgres. All right, I've already have it installed. So Postgres is a piece of software that requires a server to interface with. It's easiest to let the OS X's launched utility to keep the server running. So the server is constantly running in the background. So, and we want it to always be running in the background. Even when our machines reboot, we want it to reboot our servers, our databases. So what we'll want to do is run this long command right here, like so, followed by this launched load command. Oh. Load failed. Anyway, you shouldn't see this error. This worked yesterday. Huh, interesting. But yeah, so you shouldn't see this load failed 5. Once you run that, your server should always be running in the background, which is okay. It doesn't take up a whole lot of battery power or resources on your machine. So it won't slow your machine down if it's running in the background. Once you have Postgres installed and SQLite, you'll want to run which Postgres just to make sure everything's in the correct directory. So you see user local bin Postgres. So notice right here, I've got user local bin Postgres, and then finally, which PSQL user local bin PSQL. So now Homebrew will keep our server alive. So now we can just develop apps and not worry about like having to start the database and all of that. So the first thing we need to do is just make sure our database is running by copying the ps aux pipe grep Postgres command. And if you see anything at all, when you hit that, you're good to go. So right here, I've got that running, and I've got these other things running as well. And once our database is running, you can run create DB $uppercase user. This will create a user database. So whatever you call your local machine, like mine is TA preet right here. That's what my MacBook is called. If I run create DB $user, it's going to create a database called TA preet. And I can PSQL, which will go into my database. So if I do PSQL space $all uppercase user, I get into this different looking terminal where it says TA preet equals hashtag. This is inside the SQL server, so I can actually run like SQL commands in here. So if that happens and you have the name of your local machine here, that means you are good to go. That means you have Postgres running and you're able to create databases. And you can do \Q to exit out of the Postgres or the SQL command line or the SQL terminal. So take the next 4 minutes to do that, and we'll keep going. All right, let's keep going. So now we're gonna bring in Python. So Python already comes with Mac, but it's an older version. It's version 2. So you can download it directly from the Python website, but let's do it via the command line. So let's run brew install Python. So if I run brew install Python, it says, all right, Python 3.9 is already installed and up to date to reinstall. Great. So now, if I run in, so let's see what it says. So I'm going to type Python in my terminal, and I'm going to open up a Python shell, Python. And yours will probably say Python 2 point something. So we installed the most recent version of Python, but your Mac is still defaulting to using the older version of Python. So here we can write exit, do exit to get out of there. And what we're going to want to do is create a bash profile. And this is a bash profile is essentially for you to customize your terminal. Anytime you open up your terminal to start coding, it will customize like what version of Python you're running. It can customize colors and all of that. So you're going to run touch tilde bash profile. So touch space tilde / bash profile. If you run that, it's going to create a new file. Don't worry, when you click that, it's not going to do anything. It'll probably just, it shouldn't throw any errors or anything. It'll just look like it didn't do anything, which is a good thing. But the next thing you want to do, use that code command that we did at the very top, code. So we want to open up that bash profile into VS Code. So bash profile. And you can just copy, if I come down here, copy this code bash profile as well, paste it in there and open that up. And now I opened up, this is my personal bash profile and I've already had a bunch of stuff in here. Yours will be empty, most likely. And you'll want to say, hey, make sure that every time I open up the terminal, I want it to utilize the most recent version of Python, which is like Python 3.9. So you can copy and paste that in here, like right here. So I copied and pasted that command, the export path user local opt. So this makes sure that I'm using Python 3.9. And then you can save that and then close VS Code. And then you have to reload the bash profile for it to actually take effect. And in order to reload those settings, you have to run source bash profile. So code, now I need to reload that bash profile for those settings to take place. So that source bash profile will reload. And then once you run that, you can type in Python and you should see Python 3.9.5 instead of Python 3.2. Next, we're going to install Node Version Manager. So you're going to brew install NVM, which is Node Version Manager. And this is going to manage what version of Node we want to run on our machine. So I already have it installed and it's up to date. Great. Next, we're going to want to open up our bash profile again by running code bash profile. And we're going to want to copy some more commands in there. So export the stuff right here. Where did that go? So after you actually install Node Version Manager, it'll probably tell you once it's done loading to essentially do this exact thing inside of your terminal. It'll say this same thing. So you're going to copy and paste that stuff in here. So this will load Node Version Manager, and this loads the bash completion. So after you brew install Node Version Manager, it's going to tell you to probably do this already. And once you do that, you'll want to save your bash profile, close it out, and then again, reload it by running source bash profile, like so. And then next, you want to install the most current version of Node, which is Node 16. So as of 5/23. So Node Version Manager, install Node or install 16, which is Node 16. So I already have it installed. Great. So yeah, take the next 5 minutes to install Python and Node. And stop right here and install Git using Homebrew. All right, let's keep moving. Try to get this done before 12:10 or something. We're going to install Git using Homebrew. So Git is a version control manager that allows us to have different save points in our code. The OS does ship with Git, but it might not be up to date. So let's run brew install Git. So if you run brew install Git. Right there. So looks like mine is already installed and up to date. I can run which Git to make sure it's in the directory. You see something that says user local bin Git. After that, we're gonna create a global git ignore file or a git ignore global file by running touch. So touch followed by whatever is the touch command is like to create a new file. And we're gonna cover that later this afternoon. So I'm gonna do touch tilde / dot git ignore global. So you can copy that. And after you run that, so you can look at what ignoring files does. So if you have a git ignore global file, you can put whatever you want to ignore when you're pushing up to GitHub. So there's certain files that you don't want to push to GitHub, like or directories, files and or folders that you don't want to push to GitHub, regardless of what project you're working on, such as like node modules and just, virtual environment like env variables or files. So you can add that stuff into here, but we'll cover that at a later time. And then next we can run git config, this one, like so. The next, you want to get your git config set up to recognize your GitHub credentials. So anytime we push code to GitHub, we'll want to, instead of having to type in our username and password to push up code from our local machine onto our GitHub account, we want it to do that automatically, not have to ask us for our GitHub credentials every single time. So here there's a link to set up your username. So setting your username in Git. So you can open up the terminal, set a Git username. So git config -- global user.name, and this Mona Lisa, that should be your GitHub username. So mine is Tom Preet, one word. So if I run, so mine's already set up, but if I were to run this, I would run git Tom Preet, like so, run that. And then if I run git config global username, just to verify, I see that it's Tom Preet. And in fact, it should probably be uppercase, Tom Preet, like so. There, it's Tom Preet. And so that should be your GitHub username. So I can see my GitHub username right here, Tom Preet. There we go. Actually, I'm going to make it lowercase again. Tom Preet. Next, I'm going to close that. I'm going to set up my email. So setting your commit email address. So if you scroll down a little bit, keep scrolling past this to setting your commit email address in Git. So this is the section you're looking at. So open up the terminal, say git config global user.email. So .email, and put your email address associated with your GitHub account. So mine is preet316@gmail.com. And now I can check to see that that Git email is correct. preet316@gmail.com. And lastly, you're going to cache your GitHub password so you don't have to type it in every single time you're pushing up to GitHub. So for Mac, I'll scroll down. You can do git credentials OSX keychain. So git store erase. And yeah. So yeah, just follow these directions. And then the first time you push up to GitHub, it'll ask for your credentials, for your password. And then you type in your password once, and then you shouldn't have to type it in again every time you push to GitHub. And then last, we want to ensure that VS Code is our global text editor by running that command. If you don't see anything like that, that means it worked. Now, if I can run just to make sure that everything is working correctly, I can run git config -- global space -l. And see, I've got my username, my email, I've got a global git ignore file, and my text editor is VS Code. So let's take 2 minutes to do that. All right. Last thing. So we're going to install Bash using Homebrew. So Bash is just another shell in which allows us to interact with our computer. It's a Bash terminal. So brew install Bash. So Bash is already installed. To use this new version of Bash, we'll need to add it to our etc shells. Our etc shells directory is owned by our root user. Verify using ls-la shells. Let's see what happens if I run that. All right. So we'll need to sudo to write to it. So I'm going to see code. Let's see if this works. I'm going to try to open that up in a new window. All right, there it goes. And you're going to see the list of acceptable shells. So I've got bash, csh, zeesh. At the very bottom, you'll want to add user local bin bash to the very bottom of this list, just like right here. So I try to save it. It says retry using sudo. So failed to save shells insufficient permissions. So I'll retry using sudo. And I'll have to type in my password to my local machine. There, it finally saved it. And now we'll need to change our shell command. Let's come up here, just copy this. So I need to TP. No changes made. Cool, because I already had it as my default shell. All set. Now we can launch a new terminal window and verify our setup using bash space -- version. All right. Cool. Everything's working. Echo $shell. If I run echo $shell, I can see my user local bin bash. If you're using a different bash, such as like zeesh or something else, or a different, different shell, that's okay. Everything should still kind of work the same, but we're using bash in this program. But if you're comfortable using something else, go ahead and use it. All right. And that, if I go back. So we just completed InstallFest for the Mac OS. Again, if you have a Windows and you're comfortable using Windows, like if you're able to do all kind of everything that we just did, but on your Windows machine, definitely go ahead and do that. If you're like totally unfamiliar with Windows and you can't if you're not comfortable debugging, or if you can't find the answer somebody else somewhere else, such as a fellow student or a TA, then we recommend using Cloud9, just because it's like one thing. It works. It's pretty seamless. But with that, I'm gonna